Welcome to Coming Out of the Spiritual Closet with your host, me, Brittany Wittig. Join me every week to explore and demystify the world of modern spirituality. This week, I interview Candace Taylor, Candace the Dream Doula. She describes herself as the human form of glitter, and I 100% agree with that. You cannot help but smile when you're in Candace's energy. She is just like a warm hug. She's amazing. And in this episode, she shares so much actionable advice for basically bringing more joy into your life. She talks about the difference between routine and ritual and how to bring ritual into your daily life, how to love yourself even when things are tough. Just, there's so much here. You're going to love it. I would actually recommend that if you're someone who likes to take notes, grab a piece of paper and a pen because there are so many actionable pieces of advice here that you're going to want to write them down. Or maybe listen to it twice. Either way, without further ado, here's Candace. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this week. And today I am so excited to have Candace on the podcast. Candace, thank you so much for being here.
I am so pumped to be here. I'm like, how do I feel right now? I'm so pumped. Thank you for having me. It's an absolute pleasure.
Oh, it's so awesome to have you on. So let's just get started with a quick introduction. Can you just introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Candace Taylor. I call myself Candace the Dream Doula for fun. And that essentially is the intersection of being an educator, an advocate, a hype woman, and this all around go-to guide for what I call modern day revolutionaries. So the people who are using the things that they create in the world to transform not only their own lives, but to transform the world as well. And I really embolden and empower my client partners to birth these dreams and to lay to rest the things that are within them that are not necessarily serving their highest self or their highest vision for what their life can be. Notably, making sure that they're not sacrificing their physical, mental, and emotional well-being in pursuit of cultivating these dreams. So that's a little bit about me. I'm really thrilled to share a little bit more about my personal philosophy with the audience here. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah, and I just have to say, Candace is the ultimate hype woman. She's amazing. I'm a member of a monthly membership that she has, and it's just so awesome because she's just constantly like, yeah, hyping everyone's successes, helping us with accountability. She's amazing. So I'm so grateful that you're here. And I want to ask you, so you're a dream doula. And I got to say, like way back when we first connected, that was the first thing that like, boom, caught my eye about like your Instagram bio was that you're a dream doula. And I was like, a dream doula? Ooh, that is so cool. So can you share how did you come up with that title? And I mean, you kind of just described it that you're helping people like birth dreams. Is that
exactly?
Yeah,
exactly. This is a fun story, and I think it gives you a little bit of a insight into who I am and how I operate in the world. There's two reasons or two kind of guiding influences into my title, The Dream Doula. The first is that I took a very spontaneous trip to Israel. And when I was there, I felt the energy of the universe just like speaking so much of my life's purpose to me. And I find that travel is a great way to kind of tap into the wisdom of the universe. But, you know, I was having these conversations with individuals that I was meeting, and one woman was telling me about a doula program and how there weren't very many Black women who were doulas. And it really just lit me up to, you know, explore what a doula was, because I didn't know at the time, and, you know, how they serve the world. And in my research, I realized that I was doing all of that with my coaching clients. I was doing that in my 9-to-5 career roles. I was doing that with my family, being an advocate, being that cheerleader, being a guide and an educator to make sure that that birthing process is safe for the individual who's navigating it. And then I also started doing research on death doulas, and I was like, yes, I looked at my astrology. I know my natal chart very well, and one of the things that kind of screams out from my birth chart is that I'm okay with the uncomfortable. I'm okay with the dark. I'm okay with the taboo. And I'm okay with holding space for others to explore and be with that. And so that really aligned with the death doula framework of allowing people to, safely transition out of this lived experience, allowing their family members to find comfort and peace and also grief and pain in their passing. And so I realized I was also doing that within the kind of coaching and consulting work that I was doing for my clients. And then years later, I discovered a woman that I'm just like fascinated by. Her name is Sarah Beth Burke, and she talks about hybrid professional identities and really looking at how, for folks like me, we're multi-passionate, how our work might actually be the intersections of various industries and how we can embrace that when we're giving ourselves titles. And I was like, that's it, that's me. And so that was really where I started to call myself the dream doula and own that part of my identity and own that my work is the intersection of artistry. It is the intersection of, embodied movement practices with coaching, with consulting, and with being a cheerleader. And there's a role that exists out there that I get to decide what it is. Hello, Siri. She's like, I found this. I found you on the web. Here I am. But yeah, like really owning that came into place when I got language for what I was already doing.
Oh, wow. I love that. That's so cool. And I just love, I love that piece with the death doula too. And like that comfort with discomfort. And I feel like there's something in there about like leaning into your true emotions when there's grief and like, it's so good. I love it. So could you tell me a little bit more about your background? You've touched on it with, because when you said that you're so multi-passionate, but your background is like so freaking interesting. I'm sure people would love to hear about it.
I wish people could see what my arms are doing, but it's a tilt-a-whirl over here and I'm obsessed with it.
Right.
I'm really into tarot. And when I see there's a deck called the Wild Unknown. Mm-hmm. And in that deck, there's a Wheel of Fortune card. And it has all of these sticks that are kind of in a globe or a sphere shape. And there's beautiful, colorful ribbon intertwined. And there's an owl and there's a dark sky and the moon is in the sky and the sun is somewhere in the picture. That is literally my lived experience. That's my life. And so when that card comes out, I'm like, okay, what's next, universe? Like, well, what do you got for me? But I grew up in the inner city of Massachusetts, and I went to middle school and, elementary school in private suburban parts of Massachusetts. And so there was always this kind of dichotomy into what I'm experiencing in my surroundings and who I am inside. And I had to explore that kind of exchange with the world, right? Like I always kind of felt like this oddball out. I felt like, okay, like I get it. I relate to these things. Some of these things resonate with me, but I don't feel like they reflect me. And so it was, my whole life has been a journey of really making space for myself to be safe. And that means creating things where they don't exist, because I am multi-passionate and part of my life is about those intersections. So in college, I really loved speaking Spanish and I loved dancing. And I was like, I'm going to build my own major. And they kept saying no, and they kept saying no. And I was like, I'm going to do this. You can't say no. Whether you give me a degree in it or not, I'm doing it. But that led me to study abroad in Nicaragua. And I lived there for a year, doing dance research and studying Spanish, obviously. Wow. And then that led to me getting a Fulbright research grant. And I went back and lived there for a year and got to travel all over the country, interview people about, their personal testimonies and the history of Nicaragua, and also perform all over that country. I performed in the National Theater twice. I did my own work in the National Theater, and then I joined a musical.
Cool.
Just because why not? And I grew up dancing, so that was always kind of this thread line for me, and I knew I didn't want to sacrifice that. And that's led me to work on a Broadway musical. I did that in 2022. Helped literally, I was like, that was one of the first times I felt like a dream doula in a setting that wasn't typical. I'm like, yeah, I just birthed the musical. It's cool, no problem.
Yes.
It was incredible. But yeah, I've allowed my both personal and professional life be led by my heart and be led by my soul, be led by my intuition. And that's meant that I've had so many different, I mean, I was in the fitness industry as well. I teach dance cardio classes and helped to build a network of over 1,000 certified instructors teaching a dance cardio format called 305 Fitness. So I've done it all.
Yeah.
And I think the through line always has been Candace the Dream Doula. And so I was so grateful to get that language eventually where I can now say, yep, I was operating as this dream doula in every single, for myself and for others throughout my whole life.
So awesome. Oh my gosh. I just love all of the variety in what you've done. And I love the way you follow your intuition and the way that you are soul led. I mean, that's something I talk about a lot on this podcast. And it's just, you're such a beautiful example of what is possible when people really live that way. It's like, look at all the amazingness that can happen if you let yourself be soul led.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I feel like that's been the biggest point of contention within myself. I, for a very long time, suffered from depression, anxiety, had suicidal ideation. And I think trying to move through that was what allowed me to own being soul led, right? Like I always have been, but it was really hard. And what it created for me was anxiety, right? I always tell people your anxiety and your depression is not for you to like hold on at, you know, like you have a, like you received an award and you have a placard that says like, I have anxiety, and there's nothing wrong with it. But like your anxiety is there as a tool for you to say, wait, my soul needs something, or my soul is trying to communicate something. My soul desires something. Let me wake up to myself and try to cultivate that, or not try, and cultivate and create that, because we have, you know, this divine capacity to create things in a way that no other species on the planet has. We can just like think it and go make it. Why not use these kind of innate and natural resources that we have that, you know, don't always feel great, to lead us back to ourselves and lead us to guiding ourselves?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, yes, yes. 100%. I so completely agree with that. That's amazing. Absolutely. Yep. The anxiety, the fear, it could be a tool. It could be something that helps you for sure. Yep. Beautiful. So you talk a lot about self-care and how the wellness world kind of has twisted self-care a bit. Is that a fair way to say it? I should just let you talk about it. But what's going on with self-care and the wellness world from your perspective?
So I think, first of all, I'll say this: self-care is really, really beautiful, and it can be really powerful. What has happened is it's become a commodified industry, right? Yeah. It is $1 billion industry. I don't think people realize that when we throw out words like self-care, it feels like it's a trivial thing, but it's actually part of, you know, a global economy that is billions of dollars each year. And so I like to ask people to go a layer deeper than self-care and not just stop there. And so when I think about self-care, for me, it's a reactive experience rather than a proactive one. And I try to steer anybody that I work with, anybody that's in my community, toward a more proactive experience of taking care of themselves. Because we all know, like, you should be taking care of yourself. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think we enter a more empowered relationship with ourselves when we do it proactively. And so I use the metaphor, right? Like it's the difference between getting a filling when you go to the dentist and flossing preemptively. Like, you know that floss is going to get all of this stuff that's like hanging on your teeth, and it helps you to prevent the cavities. That's what I like to call soul care. Those are the proactive details. And then
Right.
fillings, you're going to do it because you have to, but you already have the cavity.
Right.
And that's what I look at kind of self-care as. So there's nothing wrong with it. I just think because it's so commodified, it gets trivialized, and we deprioritize it. We
Yes.
don't realize how important it is to have, daily, monthly, annual rituals around, what I like to call that soul care maintenance.
Gotcha. Yeah. So what do you think what do you think people are getting wrong about self-care? Like, is it that people are just being so reactive with it instead of proactive? Is that the big
That's definitely
issue?
one thing.
Yeah.
That's where I start with my clients. I'm like, okay,
Okay.
in what ways can we change this? Like, can we analyze where you're being reactive and create proactive systems, right?
Yeah.
And then I also think about this idea, and this is just a personal thing, right? Self-care is also a little punitive. It's like, I'm burnt out, or I'm exhausted, or
Right.
I'm depleted, or I'm broke, or, all of these negatives. And
Right.
we shame ourselves. So self-care can often be steeped into kind of this guilt or shame experience. I'm taking care of myself because I feel badly about the circumstance that I'm in.
Right.
Whereas I think of soul care as rehabilitative, right? It's like helping you to restore yourself to that optimized existence. And so that becomes your baseline rather than hitting these, low moments, these rock bottom moments, and using that as the moment to take care of yourself. It's like, I'm nurturing because I love myself. I'm nurturing because I want my, if you consider your being a machine, I want my machine to operate at its optimal capacity all the time. You wouldn't have a vacuum cleaner in your house just being like, I know it doesn't work, but this is probably not a great example because I know some people do this, right? But you wouldn't pick up the vacuum cleaner that you know is broken and expect it to turn on and
Right.
function. Right. And you're not like then talking badly at the vacuum for not working because you know it doesn't work. We do that
Right.
to ourselves, right? We look at the machine of our own beings and we're like, oh, I messed that up again, or I've mismanaged my money again, and now I'm in this situation, or I trusted that person again, and now look where I am. We bully ourselves
Yes.
into taking better care of ourselves, and that's not really my vibe. I'm like,
Yeah.
how can we be on our own team? How can we cheer ourselves on and celebrate ourselves through the lens of a compassionate, caring model?
Yes. Ooh, I appreciate that very much. This idea of I'm as you're speaking, I'm realizing I'm feeling a little called out in some of my own stuff. Like I immediately thought of some places where like I could be more proactive and take a more soul care approach for sure. That's really interesting. Let's say that someone has like a routine that they go through. They're listening to this and they're like, well, I have my self-care routine. Like I already have that. Is there a way that they could examine that to see if it's really effective or to see if maybe there are some tweaks that need to be made?
Yes, I love that you mentioned this. I always talk about the difference between routine and ritual. Routine is
Oh,
self-care, right?
okay.
This is another thing that people, if we're going to the self-care 2.0, which is soul care, um, people get wrong that this idea of a routine as the model. And
Okay.
here's why I don't subscribe to this. I think routine numbs you. I think routine takes you out of the equation. And I believe that soul care should be personalized and should be an intimate connection with yourself, right? You should be present, awake, and aware. And with routine, we can get into, you know, our flow. We can get
Yeah.
into the state where we're no longer present in the moment and connected to what we're doing. And
Right.
it's interesting. I also think that punitive quality like can kind of hook itself onto routine,
Mm.
because if you miss it, oh man, I didn't wake up early this morning and do my yoga routine. I said this yesterday. I'm like, I'm so mad at myself because I didn't do my yoga in the morning. And I was like, the routine doesn't matter. And so what I personally replace routine with is ritual.
Okay.
I think ritual asks you to be fully present. It asks you to connect into a sense of tradition. It asks you to connect into a sense of community. It asks you to connect into power that's beyond you. And the reason why I've kind of latched onto that ritual theme is because I think our existence is designed to be interdependent. The
Mm.
hyper independence, and I think self care speaks to this, right? Like, buy your bath bomb, get your candle, block out the world. Like, that's the picture of self care. That's
Right.
not the point, right? The point
Yeah.
for me of self care and soul care is that I'm my optimized self so that I can take care of myself properly. And then I can go and serve the world from my overflow, right? From being fully in my optimal positioning, I can then say, generously I can give to other people, right? And so
Yes.
I think this ritual model reminds us of that and tap and hooks all of our actions, all of our proactive well-being maintenance into the interdependent and connected model, right? So if
Mhm.
you think of, obviously, like, churches maybe, oh, not the best example to give because we all have different feelings about church. But one of the things that I've loved most about my church experience
Mhm.
is how ritualized it is, right? How
Mhm.
special these moments of connection. I know that even if I'm having my own, worship experience, for example, in church, where I'm singing and I'm feeling like I'm connected to divine energy by myself, I
Yeah.
know that there's a collective of individuals also doing that with me, right? And I think
Right.
that was so powerful in the pandemic when I started watching church at home. I'd be in
Mhm.
my home by myself and still feel that same divine presence as if I was in the room of 100 people in the church service, right? And so
Yeah.
I just bring that up to say, when you're ritualizing your life, it taps you back into that essence of interdependence and reminds you that this is not just for you. This is for you to get yourself back to that optimal state. But once you get there,
Mhm.
part of being there is to say, now, how can I serve other people? How can I use my own light? How can I use the fact that I am full of joy and enlightenment to now benefit and empower and embolden and nourish others?
Mm. Ooh, I love that. So, how, if someone's listening right now and they're like, yeah, okay, that resonates with me, how could someone shift what is routine into more like ritual?
I love this question. This is so good. So the primary, I have a personalized framework that I guide all of my clients through and that I use for my own lived experience.
Okay.
The first portion of that framework is self intimacy and self discovery.
Mm.
And what I use as kind of my flashlight, like what I'm looking for in that self intimacy and self discovery moment, are what are my needs, what are my values, and what are my desires. I want as much clarity on those three things as possible. And I playfully and creatively do that self exploration so that it's joyful, right? We can learn a lot about ourselves and it's painful. I will raise my hand. I've learned a lot about myself through rock bottom, and I'm grateful for those moments. Don't get me wrong, they're beautiful lessons. But if we're initiating something, right? Like, I always tell people, I have this kind of catchphrase that I use, like, stop microdosing on misery. There is enough.
Mm.
Our society is obsessed with being miserable. We're
Yes.
obsessed with being mad. We're obsessed with being angry. We're obsessed with being worried and frightened. And
Yeah.
those things are naturally occurring. I never want to shame people out of those things because, again, there's so much value. But what if we turned our eye to joy? What if
Yeah.
we, like, had a compass that was navigating us to joyous experiences? The
Yeah.
anger, the madness, the misery would not go away. We would still have it, but wow, would our souls be so much more joy filled? And I personally am in pursuit of that. So all that
Yes.
to say, in this first part of the work, I invite people into self discovery that's playful, expansive, and joyous, seeking what are my core needs, what are my core values, and what are my core desires, right?
Mm. Yeah.
Then from there, we start to strategically plan, right? We start to think about what are the strategies that will help me cultivate more of what I need in my life, more of
Mm.
what I value in my life, more of what I desire in my life. And this is a perfect way to re-envision your routines, right? If you
Yeah.
have a morning routine where you get up, you brush your hair, you go shower, you brush your teeth, and you know you have a core need for more joy in your life, and you know you have a core value for community impact, and you know you have a core desire to feel more pleasure, the way that you brush your teeth, maybe you hum to yourself while you're brushing your teeth so that there's more joy in that experience. Maybe you have they have those like whiteboards that you can put in your shower, where you can scribble down creative ideas for how you can impact the world more positively, right? And so
Mm.
now your routine becomes ritual, and moves beyond just that like framework that you're numb in, and more of something that you're actively engaged in.
Mm. Oh,
And then I'll
cool.
just share the last part of that framework. I got to
Yeah.
my point before I got to the end of the framework, but the last part of that is to celebrate yourself, right? To
Mm.
enjoy the experience and to affirm yourself in it so that it becomes more of an iterative process, right? So that
Okay.
I'm inclined to do this again. We know that when we get incentive, and we know that when we get celebrated, we are more inclined to do the things that we're incentivized to do and celebrated for. So build
Yes.
that into the flow, right? Celebrate yourself for the things that you discovered. Celebrate yourself for structuring a roadmap to cultivating more of what you desire. Then celebrate yourself for actually doing that thing and make that an iterative loop.
Yes. Ooh, okay, awesome. That's amazing. I love this idea of making these just really simple, doable tweaks that shift your routine into ritual.
Exactly.
Like that's so manageable. I love it. When people do get into like a really dark place, maybe really with a lot of anxiety, maybe in some kind of a rock bottom, how can people still like love themselves and feel proud to be themselves? Do you have any advice on that? Because I know that's one that's really the hardest.
Yeah. I'll just speak from what has served me,
Yeah.
and the model that I then use to serve my clients and my client. I'll call all of my clients client partners because I think that we're exchanging energy, and I learn as much from them as they learn from me, right?
Oh, I love
Um,
that. Yeah.
but what has served me, there's a couple of things. Interdependence is one of my core values for a reason. I don't believe that we're here to navigate anything on our own,
Mm.
anything, even the darkest moments of our lives. I think we learn and integrate the learnings independently, right? The
Yeah.
way that an experience is going to land for me, I could never translate to somebody else because I'm my own being.
Right.
But navigating that, we're not meant to do that alone. And we can look at how, humans of yesteryear used to operate and function. We were hunter gatherers in community. You were
Yeah.
not isolated and independent. And in fact, if you were isolated from your community, that was looked at as death, right? Like
Yeah.
that impacted your sense of survival. And so just flipping the model that we've adopted on its head and getting and restoring us back to like true humanity, I think is so important. If you are in a low moment, and honestly, I would ask people do this before they get to the low moment, cultivate safe community, start
Mm.
networking, start collaborating, start finding people who are like-minded and like-spirited, so that when you do go through these low moments, because you will, it's not an if, it's a when,
Right.
um, you have people that you can engage with and that you trust. That's why I created the Pocket Full of Sunshine membership. I anticipate navigating depressive episodes. I
Yeah.
anticipate navigating anxiety. I anticipate all of the challenges that I've gone through in the past cycling back into my life at some point in the future. But I have
Right.
this community that I know, again, right? Those are my client partners. So I know on my low days, I can say, hey, y'all, I'm exhausted today.
Yeah.
Somebody send me a funny meme and pick me up. And guess what? My group does that for me. And then I
Yeah.
get to be the leader that also pours that back into them, right? So interdependence, I think, is going to be key. Find a community, find, even if it's a one-on-one relationship, find someone that you can trust that will just be present and hold space for you and can hold you accountable to the core needs, core desires, and core values you say are your personal truth. Um, And then the other layer of this, again, is to use that like an alarm clock, right? I think I love using this metaphor because sometimes our alarm clocks do go off for a long time. You know, it's like on the on your nightstand and you're like, I can't get up yet,
Yeah.
right? But you would not allow yourself to have your alarm going off for 2 hours.
Right.
You would get up and turn
Right.
it off, right? You would get up and do the thing that you know turns it off.
Right.
And so that's where, for me, um, rituals come into place. And I'm really playful with my rituals. I have something that I call my ritual database, where anything that I know that has served me, I'm documenting it, right? And
Wow.
I believe that we have 12 areas of our life, categories. And I've found that through the Inner You coursework by Handel Group. I love that the way that they frame our lived experience. But
Mm.
I take these 12 areas of my life and I have rituals for all 12. How I relate to myself, how I relate to my body, how I relate to my time, how I relate to my money. And I write down and I organize this by, when I'm in my low lows, which of these rituals is actually going to serve me? Because some rituals are not going to serve you when you're at your lowest lows. Some
Right.
are going to be the little kind of energy boosts when you're, not in the best mood, but you just need a little pep talk really quickly.
Yeah.
And so I'm really in constant reflection around what's serving me most effectively, so that I already know what what to turn to in those low moments, right? Um,
Yes.
so
Wow.
creating those personal rituals and allowing yourself to access them in those moments and turning off the alarm clock intentionally, right?
Hmm.
Doing the thing that restores your soul.
Yes.
Sometimes the bubble bath is not going to cut it. If you're
Right.
burnt out, the bubble bath will feel really amazing for your body. But in terms of your relationship to yourself, if you've not integrated a ritual, if you've not integrated soul care there, the bubble bath isn't going to do it.
Right. Right. Wow. Okay. I love it. This is great. This is going to be so helpful for people. Yeah, it's amazing. Let's say someone has put some of this into place and they've started like shifting from routine into ritual, they're doing soul care. What are they notice? How are they going to know that this is kind of working? What's it going to feel like for them?
So here's what I like to use to like just measure myself and my sense of wellness.
Mhm.
How many times in a day, how many times in a week, how many times in a month do I say I fucking love being me?
Ooh, I like
That's
that.
it. That's it. I use that because it's so simple. It's not like I don't have to then create. I love rubrics and spreadsheets. I'm a data nerd. If you work with me as a client, you will have so many templates, so many spreadsheets, so like so much, right? You'll have all the tools. But I find even as I build those things for my clients, we get lost in the sauce sometimes. And that's part of the play, not a big deal.
Yeah.
But this, tiny tool, do I love being me?
Right.
And if I don't, I know there's something in my life that I need to optimize. I know there's something in my life I need to pay more attention to. I know there's an exploration of how I can better serve who I uniquely am that I need to embark on.
Ooh, that's good. Okay. That's
Keeping it super simple and sweet today for you.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, this is so great because it's so clear and it's so actionable. I feel like someone listening right now can immediately make some of these changes in their life today if they wanted to and apply
Absolutely.
this. Wow. Well, it sounds like, Candace, you are an amazing person to work with. If someone wants to do that, how would they get in touch with you?
You're the best. I would love to work with all your humans because I know this group that you've gathered in your orbit, like I know y'all are special people. So before I dive into that, right? Like
Mhm.
I want to just emphasize that I used to have this kind of I want to fix everything at once approach to my life.
Mhm.
Over problematizing my existence, like, oh, this one area is not perfect. So my life sucks, right? Like I definitely had that spirit and that nature to me. And so if
Mhm.
you're in that place, I just want to first welcome you into appreciating yourself, acknowledging yourself, maybe take 10 seconds during, while you're listening this, to write down, in what ways do I love my life? In what ways do I value who I am? In what ways am I proud of the way that I'm living? I don't think that we do that enough. And I
Yeah.
think it would really serve us to zero in on where we need to make the change, because it's honestly more often than not as much change as we feel that we need, right?
Yes.
So I definitely relate to the folks who are chronically microdosing on misery. I had a chapter of my life. I do not speak about that from a place of judgment. I speak about it with very strong conviction because I lived it.
Yeah.
And I remember very vividly, a friend I was angry with at the time, he was like, "You're just like allowing yourself to be unhappy." I was,
Mm.
and it was so painful in the moment. I was living in NYC, which I'm returning to in a new cycle now.
Yeah.
I was so in debt. I was so overworked, so underpaid. My relationships were so unhealthy. My friendships were unhealthy. I was physically exhausted all the time.
Yeah.
And I was just like rowing it in the BS every single day. And he
Mm.
was so insensitive when he said this to me, but it woke me up because I realized I'd moved to New York to be a professional dancer. I wasn't doing that.
Oh,
I had, left this Fulbright research experience in Nicaragua on a high, feeling like so elated and so passionate about the work I was doing. I was not doing that in my day to day. And
yeah.
so even though it was like kind of, a rough shake, it was exactly what I needed. And I learned we all need that. Right. And I
Yeah.
want to be that for the people that I partner with, but with more compassion and more kindness and more safety and love. Right.
Yeah.
Um, so just know, if you're navigating those lows in your life, you're not alone, and it's not your fault. This
Mm.
world is not designed to serve, I think, multi-passionate human beings. It's not designed to serve the creative visionaries who don't want to sacrifice their personal wellness for their creations, right? For their unique visions.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to create an anti-status quo world where we are serving folks like us, right? Um,
Yes.
so if you're curious to work with me, I want to offer something really special for folks that have stuck it out with us. This has been a really beautiful, lengthy conversation. I have a ritual that I call the Soul Care Vision Roadmap that walks you through, in a 2-hour experience, those three portions of the framework that I shared earlier on today, right? We're going to do some self-discovery work. We're going to get you some clarity around what you need in your life right now, where the priorities around just meeting your needs, what your core values are that you can start to like build a purposeful life around, and what are your desires. We're so big on suppressing our desires. We're like, oh well, it's not a must have. Like, let's just start integrating the I want it into our life a little bit more often. So we'll do that. And I like to play with tarot and astrology, and guided meditations and other playful rituals for that portion. Then we go and we build together a 30-day action plan. So we're going to look at how can you cultivate those through intentional action, through intentional rituals over the course of 30 days. And one thing I love that you kind of mentioned this in our discussion earlier, I build in or support you to build in metrics. How will you know you've achieved this? Right. So it's
Right.
not just not enough to say, I want more money.
Right.
What amount of money do you want? And what are the milestones along the way that you're going to celebrate yourself for? So we'll build in a whole celebration ritual. I have an amazing kind of experience where I create personal empowerment podcasts or pep talks for my clients. So you'll leave with a little mini kit of, pep talks that are your voice or your words that you can kind of tap into and access when you're ready to celebrate yourself, or when you're needing just like to be reanimated. And so that experience is typically $297. But for anyone who tunes into your podcast, I'm taking $100 off of that experience. So incredibly
Ooh.
high value. You get so much out of this. And I know
Yes.
that your people are perfectly primed for this. So if you use, I'll share the link for you, share the link with you for people to purchase. But if you use Out of the Closet as your promo code, you're going to get $100 off of that service.
Ooh. That's so good. You guys jump on that. That's awesome.
I'm so pumped. I'm so pumped. I love hosting those and they're just so incredibly valuable. I wanted to make sure that I shared something good with this community.
Oh, that's amazing. So I'm going to put the link for that down in the show notes. So you can, the link and the code. So it's really easy to remember though, out of the closet. That is awesome. Okay. Thank you so much. I'm super excited for everyone listening right now because that's amazing. I guess the last thing I always like to ask, is there any just like one piece of advice that you would have for someone who is just on a personal development path? Like just something that is a piece of advice you have for everybody on this kind of journey.
That's a beautiful question. Okay, two things are coming to the surface. And I feel like I've been saying them over and over again, but this is what Spirit's telling me to say. So whatever.
Oh, yeah.
The first is affirm yourself and acknowledge yourself on the journey. I feel like too many of us are uncomfortable with this. Too many of us minimize this. If you're not an advocate for yourself, if you're not a cheerleader for yourself, there's no way you can expect other people to do that with integrity. And so I invite you to really shift how you relate to yourself and to speak in an affirming way and speak in a loving way, speak in a compassionate way to yourself and ritualize that. Make it part of your day-to-day experience. For a person like me, I'm all day long just telling myself how proud I am, how amazing I am, how brilliant that idea was, how proud I am of that collaboration. And it shifts the way that I operate and how I show up. And I notice there is a marked difference when I am not as proactive about this. So that would be the first thing that I would share. And then I think, I'm in a season of embracing the void, right? Like I don't know what's next. Yeah. And I used to be the person who wanted to know exactly what the next, milestone was. Like I wanted to have the whole picture laid out in front of me. What I'm living right now, I couldn't have dreamt up. Yeah. Candace of 6 months ago, Candace of a year ago, Candace of 5 years ago could not have dreamt where I am today. Right. What is present that has been the constant are my needs, my values, and my desires. I've clarified those, I've expanded those, and I'm experiencing those now. But the way that that's showing up is blowing my mind. And so, I invite, for those that this is resonating with, I invite you to do something crazy and let your hands off the steering wheel. It's like one of those Tesla cars. It's self-operating. You don't have to do that forever. When you're ready to put your hands back on the wheel, do it. But the delight that the universe can offer you when you just focus on what you need to focus on, which is, what do I need? What do I desire? What do I value? When you focus on those things and start letting the universe drive you, start letting divine energy drive you, you will tap into things that blow your mind. Wow. Ooh, it's so good. Yes. I love that. Thank you. Thank you. I was pouring that back into myself.
Oh, it was amazing. Amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much for being here, for all of the wisdom. It has been so awesome having you on. This was an absolute delight. I am so grateful that you have created this space. This work is so important. I'm celebrating you, Brittany. You're changing the world from your overflow. Hell yeah. And
thank you. Thank you for your dedication to it. It's beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much, Candace. And thank you everyone who's listening. Have a beautiful week. I'll catch you next time.